Oh, dear. This is a gab fest called Let's Talk.
Wait a minute.
This is Let's
She's
Talk.
already improvising.
Darn minute.
Read the script,
Well,
lady.
no, you pot up all the mics and we're just cackling out of the gate. This is Let's Talk, getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on-the-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492, or you can tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR.
Yes, indeed. And may I just say that we are welcoming to the studio today Sally Phillips.
Oh, hello, thank you.
Shelley Rugg is
Hi
here, and Charles Schultz.
Hello.
And I am Paul Raffel. And when you do call in to 415-663-8492, wait until you hear me say you're on the air. You'll hear a little noise as I put you in the system. Just hang on until I say you're on the air, and then turn down your radio. Give us any name you like, and please keep the language clean.
Well, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention we have a birthday. Hosni Mubarak, 90 years young. Just any fans of the former Egyptian dictator, think about him today.
Inshallah.
There you are. What is the topic today?
The topic today, which was actually kind of suggested to me by an article that I read, and also by that horrible thing that happened in Toronto with the incel guy, the involuntary celibate guy who drove into a crowd with a car. And it seemed to me that he seemed like an archetypal boy, man-child who had no grounding in certainly in
Human relationships?
And apparently this is a big thing now, this incel thing,
Yeah.
involuntary celibacy, in which they blame women for not going to bed with them when they want them. Walk into a bar and say,
Definitely,
hey, they say all the right lines
hinting at
that
a
they've
deeper
learned.
problem.
Yeah, right.
Was that him? I thought he was sort of severely disabled, but I didn't thought he was like very, very autistic. But I know that's neither here nor there.
Oh, really? I don't know.
Well, there's a
It
whole
could be.
movement, incel movement.
Yeah,
Hey, what
the
is
incel movement.
incel?
Involuntary
Invol-
celibacy.
Involuntary celibacy. I'm
It's
in.
just
I'm
poor-
in.
These
The
poor
women,
mama's boys.
you know.
with
Can I get a T-shirt?
social
Want 'em.
skills. So the subject, the topic today is
Helicopter
parenting.
And
And I think if you call in, use a storybook name today.
Storybook
That'd be
name.
really
Okay.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
Rumpelstiltskin's a nice name.
Rumpelstiltskin's. And why, it never bothers us that only half of the people in the studio actually know anything about the topic we're going to talk about. So luckily we have two mothers here who can give their perspectives on parenting.
That doesn't stop a lot of people.
Well, and I wouldn't necessarily call myself a mother, but thank you for the.
Well,
Like you're a
it's been
bad
said.
mother.
It has been
Shut
said.
your mouth. Talk
It's-
about Charles.
It's often, people who've never been a parent who seem to think they know the most.
Oh,
Well,
Yes.
Clearly,
clue us in
it's
then.
obvious you should be doing X, Y, Z.
Of course.
I've actually given that some thought, that topic of the friends who give you advice or judge you for how you choose to parent or a decision you make in parenting, and they are people who haven't had kids. And it's interesting because I've had to grapple with that. And
Sure.
I think that people project their pasts. People who don't have kids, they've either to be fair, actively helped in raising kids, maybe nieces or nephews or whatever, or they are really projecting their past and their upbringing onto what they perceive that you are doing. And I've had some anger over being hurt by friends who make fun of or judge a choice I've made, and I had to really think hard about it. So that's that's the conclusion I came to. Well, this person, and then you have to really know the person in a sense if you really want to figure out what exactly it was, or you can even learn about them. Like I intuited that a friend of mine had a perhaps a bad experience with her own father, maybe not directly, maybe something she saw him do, and so then she somehow transferred it over to something. I mean, it's interesting.
Well, that's really compassionate of you to take that perspective and have that understanding.
Yes, as I claw the air angrily. Thank you.
I've had it happen to me plenty of times with complete strangers.
Oh, me too. Yes.
Really?
Complete strangers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Really?
But
Yeah.
it's tough, but I mean, it's tough because sometimes they're right, too. It's not always just that they're wrong.
Not in Shelley's or my.
I guess you're the two.
I might have been wrong that one time.
What do you want to give an example, Shelley? I mean, is there an example you could give?
Oh, gosh. It's been a long time.
One of your
honestly.
angels was innocently swinging a cat around by its tail, and somebody dared to criticize my baby.
No, it wasn't criticizing the kids. It's criticizing the mommy. That's what we're talking
Yes,
about.
that's what we're talking about.
But
Kids always get criticized.
So then, do you think there is such a thing as helicopter parenting? There's one question to start off with.
Well, I had an
Yes.
experience that was completely the opposite of helicopter parenting.
boating parenting,
I had
bicycle
a friend.
parenting.
She and I were both parents, and we were going to go to lunch with another friend of hers, a mommy too. And my friend said to me, "Please do not say anything to my friend about how she parents her child."
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
And I, couldn't help but wonder what I was about to go through. So we're in the restaurant, and basically she just completely hands off, completely interaction free, allowing her child to roam freely throughout to the the restaurant, climb on tables, dump out salt.
Oh.
As a former waiter, I can tell you we really love those parents.
And so then I'm stewing over the fact that I've been told, please don't say anything.
Right.
And
Well-
so there's where's that balance between, I the other day intervened in a very gentle way with a mommy whose attention was not on the shopping cart. The child is now climbing on the shopping cart. I know they tip over, so I opened my mouth and said, "Oh, be careful! That could you could hurt yourself." And then
That's
the mother heard
appropriate.
it and turned and said, "Oh, get down off of the shopping cart." So that.
That's appropriate.
Yeah.
I mean, in my view, I would do the same thing. A helicopter parent, we should maybe define it.
A helicopter
Yeah.
parent, also called a cosseting parent, a parent who pays extremely close attention to a child's or children's experiences and problems, particularly at educational institutions. They hover overhead, overseeing their child's life. So there are cases now where it's become so competitive to get into college and everything that the parents are actually going to the college admissions meetings instead of their children.
Wait, they interview for the child.
See, that's really a big botch fest.
And of course, that
that's
whole
a
thing
terrible
with,
mistake.
with
It's off the
schools as
mark,
well. It
yeah.
starts in kindergarten now.
And I don't
apparently.
know how that is allowed. That
That's a big
really
issue.
infantilizes the child, which
Aha.
is what there's a really bizarre thing going on in our culture of infantilizing but giving all power to the
Yeah.
child concurrently.
Wow.
So I have witnessed that, and I think that it is maybe a little our generation or a little after. I'm not sure. My children are adult.
Well,
I don't know how old
the
yours
Mine are
term
in their
helicopter
mid-20s.
Yeah,
helicopter parenting
mine are a little older.
apparently started during the millennial generation. So
in the
90s,
late 90s.
90s to
or mid-90s is when I noticed it. And I also think that there's a correlation between helicopter parenting and having a single is this going to be a terrible thing to say? A single child? It's more likely to happen if
Well,
you
yeah.
just have
Only
an
child.
only child.
Yeah.
Only
That's
child.
what I meant. A single, an unmarried
An
child.
unmarried child.
Well,
I think it's more. It's
Sure. There's
likely
more
as you
focus.
focus on that one child.
Which is by the time you get to the last child, I'm the youngest. It's just like what having just whatever.
You're just
go
feral.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, my mother literally said, "You don't want to go to college. Go travel or dig a ditch or do something." I mean, so the opposite of helicopter parenting. Actually, it's probably quite wise. I just went to college because it was sort of thing to do. But it is a big legal issue because I was in college. One of my girlfriends I lived with was in the sociology department and got a subscription to the Chronicle of Higher Education, so I used to read that. And this is 15 years ago now, or 15 years ago now, and it was an issue because, of course, at 18, you're a legal adult, and then the parents, they want the medical records of the children, they want to know all about their grades and the this and the that, which they're not legally entitled to have. And they're saying, well, wait, we're paying for this. Why don't we?
It's a transition.
Why can't we manage flopsies every minute? And so, but it was because there was a suicide at MIT, I think it was. Again, it's like 15 years ago. This young woman has, been going to the campus sort of psychiatrist and is clearly having lots and lots of problems, and the parents don't know anything about it. So I don't know if they sued MIT or whatever it was, but it became one of these issues where they want more and more access and not allowed to have it. And anyway, I don't know if that's helicopter parenting.
But that is a specific situation where the actual safety of the person is involved, and so you do. I think, that's a little different.
I think one of the outcomes of the helicopter parent is that they think if you're not a helicopter parent, that you're doing it wrong. So, for example, when I was a kid, we would roam freely throughout the neighborhood for miles.
Yeah.
Go to the park by ourselves, go to each other's houses. Our mom would come out in the street when it was dinner time and holler our names.
Yeah.
And we'd come running home. Nowadays, if a child is allowed to go walk to the park by themselves, somebody might call the cops.
It's
Maryland. It's happened to that couple in Maryland twice, that their kids, 10 and 6, I think, walking a mile to and from the park to their home. First time they were seen and reported, Child Protective Services picked them up and brought them home and gave them they were going to be fined they were going to be charged with
Child
neglect,
negligence, and it happened the second time. They took the children away for a little while at least.
Wow.
Yeah. Maryland, you're not allowed. Children are not allowed to walk alone under a certain age, like 11 or something.
Well,
gosh.
at that time, Paul Elmer brought this
how do
point
we
up.
keep up with this stuff?
Well, people used to be in their houses. I mean, it's the other thing. It's like every house had a mom in it who was, in the neighborhood. Now everybody's working. The neighborhoods are sort of empty. So,
that's a good point.
When I was growing up, it was sort of the end of that era where dinner time was a specific time, but in between the end of school and dinner time, you just
you ran around.
So then that's more latchkey kids, right? That's like the opposite of helicopter parenting, which was a big
never
thing.
Understood
a big
what
thing
that
when
meant.
I was.
It was an after-school
when I first
program.
came here.
It's when you go home from school and the
nobody's
keys
home.
under the mat and you let yourself in the house yourself and get your own snack.
Well,
and
that was me.
Hope your brothers don't beat you up. And
Hope your brothers
till
don't
your
I
mom
would
gets
just
home.
eat a whole box of Pepperidge Farm cookies and watch Dark Shadows.
That explains.
So
Peanut butter and honey.
We're having a conversation here on Let's Talk about helicopter parenting.
And what's that number?
And the number is 663-8492. That's in the fabulous 415.
415-663-8492.
Elite. 415-663.
And I don't want it to go unnoticed, Charles, that you use the
That I'm
name.
nude.
That you use the name Flopsy.
Oh, Flopsy? Yeah.
When you-
What,
That's a storybook name.
It was, that's right. Why storybook names? You said people who call in should.
I don't know. I just made it up.
I meant Mopsy. Anyway, just for the record, I said Flopsy.
Little Red Riding Hood. Call in.
Hunka Munka, Tom Thumb. The number is 663-8492. I love the Two Bad Mice. My favorite Beatrix Potter story.
We're talking about actually parenting in general, but focusing on helicopter parenting. And neither of you would describe yourselves as helicopter mothers, for example, even with your firstborn. I mean, were you more protective of the firstborn than the second? Once you'd done the first one, then the second one was kind of,
I think I came close when my daughter was in middle school, and and at that point, all the kids had their cell phones.
The world's longest
And
umbilical
texting.
cord.
That's
And
good.
there was some really nasty text bullying happening. And I went to the school and talked to the principal, is there anything we can do? And he basically said the best thing we can do is stay out of it and let them work it out.
Interesting. Lord of the Flies, always a good option.
But that's part of the thing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, for helicopter
yeah.
parents, the ones who are truly committed
Yeah,
to
they wouldn't back
safeguarding
down.
their
They
children
would say, "I'm
from
sorry,
anything."
sir. I
Yeah.
pay your, I pay part of your,
Your salary.
your salary,
yeah.
and you're going to do what I say."
Well, this is all about life chances too. I hate that phrase, but that people want their child in an increasingly the social mobility basically having died in the United States. You want your child to be the best and get into the best school, and all of the time is managed too. They take them to classes and to this and to that.
That
and-
could be part of what's missing the mark. Wanting those things for your child as opposed to wanting them to be creative thinkers.
Or be a good person. How
Be
about
their
that?
own
Be a good person, be their own person, right? To
Right.
be really to discover who they are and move towards what they want for their life.
But this harkens back to, what would this be, the 18th century, when or if you were a family of means, at least, your daughter would learn the pianoforte.
Learn a little French,
and
needlepoint.
needlepoint, and another language, and the art of conversing or something, whatever, and in a way,
And go to college to meet
Yeah.
the right man.
Sure,
yeah,
I
make
think
the right match. And so, in a way, this is oddly coming back around, except that, I don't know, college debt and the dearth of jobs or opportunities. I don't know, is college really, I guess for helicopter parenting, yes, college is a big thing. I actually have a friend, a dear friend who was a bit of a helicopter parent. She's really eased off now that her child is a young adult. But yes, she's really she was really like tennis and piano, classical piano,
Like
and
the
every
child
time we
must
came
do.
over, she made him play some piano for us, in which we would cringe that the kid wanted to crawl away.
Yeah.
And anyway, I mean, he's a really accomplished young man, and he lives, across the country from his parents, and they're fine. I mean, I think ultimately it's balanced, but he was the only child. She had lost her mother when her mother was only in her, I think, maybe late 40s from a very terrible illness. So, I think there's also a fear of loss, or with maybe families who are immigrant families who are very helicoptery.
Well,
Well, they
that's an
want-
interesting point
yeah.
because that's a stereotype, right, of the Asian mother who is managing her brood.
Is it Asian? I mean, I'm just thinking people coming from another country where they
sure.
have to kind of bust through this, whatever the blockades are of being new to the country, to prove something and make your kids
Take
tough.
advantage
Yeah.
of the American dream.
And this
that
is how they
come
make
from.
their kids tough and successful, is via this style. So
Sure.
what were you going to
The
say,
so-called technical.
Charles?
Well, one, the rich Westerners still do the same thing with their daughters in particular. Now, I love the fact that my aunt is a fabulous painter. I love the fact that my mother still reads classical Greek. But the arts and certain parts of the humanities, to this day, are what rich men do, dump off their daughters in. And so there's, even though it looks like a good thing, they're so well educated, they are have these interesting pursuits, but they're sort of denied agency. They're not supposed to be like the eldest son, who's supposed to, be different. But, for a lot of people who aren't in that world of the very wealthy, which is, most of our audience, social mobility for most of the people who are listening to me right now are, do you remember that night when we had hors d'oeuvres at Nick and Tina's, and then we had the entree at the house next door at Rick and Steve's? And that would be social mobility here. But for the people that want their children to have careers. So I have a friend who's a lawyer in San Francisco and was not the daughter of wealthy people, but of successful professionals. And for her, she wanted to go to college and become a professional and sort of had that pressure. I think a lot of it internalized, a lot of it coming from her mother, who was also a professional, to sort of repeat that. I think it's a little sad to me because it's focused on a career or a sort of career path rather than some kind of search for meaning or truth. So when I was at the University of Michigan, which is just a massive glorified technical school. I mean, I would encounter young women and young men who, started off in the humanities and said, well, I'm transferring to engineering. And I'd say, well, why are you transferring to engineering? And they would say, well, you can make money.
Yeah.
I'm like, if society has its 19-year-olds trying to cynically plan their careers, like, I started my retirement account. Aren't we supposed to be doing drugs?
That's what happened in the 90s when all the power in the film business suddenly became a behest of the MBAs in the business. So there was a cultural shift.
So, yeah.
Well, I'd say when the sound came in, that also happened. The banks took over the film industry. But we will have this conversation on your show, The Magic Lantern.
No, but I can't tell you how many young people I talked to who are going to get MBAs because rather than going to film school to learn film theory and criticism or editing or filmmaking, they wanted to be on the business end in it, and that there was a real shift, and that's just a sort of a touchstone. That's sort of an example.
There's the thing that was a real eye-opener to me when I first came to the States. There was just a news program. They were interviewing students or coming into graduation, something like that. And they were saying, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this was in California, and 3 of them said, quote, "Oh, I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer."
Or,
as if they're the same, in the same ballpark.
Hang on a
But
minute.
helicopter parenting, also you can't be in your child's life. That's very new. So we've only done that for the last 150 years where we don't actually know our children, that strangers handle them all the time. So I think women especially, mothers especially, feel, I think I'll try and speak for my own mother. She was a helicopter parent in the sense that she wanted to push me out of a helicopter on several occasions. But whereas she had to be a professional, she was a single mother, she had to go out and work all the time, and deeply regretted not being able to be a mother in the sense of spending much more time with her children. To compensate for the fact that we don't spend time with our kids anymore, I think there's this thought of, well, I'll curate their life so completely that they'll be perfect and excellent and they'll have the best life.
And there's part of it is that there are fewer children being born in families and later in a woman's life. So there's a greater investment feel to it because you only have one or two or one.
Got to get it right.
You got to get this one right because we don't have 8 more to try it again.
Yeah.
Right?
There was a show on
415-663-8492. Call in, please.
A show on, I guess it was HBO. It was exceedingly accoladed and very popular called Big Little Lies, and it's about a cluster of families in, I guess it's Carmel or Monterey, and upwardly mobile, mostly very affluent, and it is a pretty scathing illustration of those kids who are coddled, they're little kids, whatever they would be, elementary school or just before that, and their parents, and it's a real take no prisoner. It starts out with a real take no prisoners attitude about it, and it's sort of it's just scathing satire about the mothers being very dominant in the school and dominant over what I talked about before, the dominance over the child in terms of the values, and yet the allowing them to really rule the roost. The children are very, they're little gods and goddesses. Yeah. The show, then everything becomes more nuanced as the show develops, and it actually becomes something else. But it's I mean, it's part of our vernacular.
Do you remember My Super Sweet 16? This was an MTV reality show, I think, was about, it's in the LA Basin. All the crimes of the world are perfected first in the LA Basin.
The over-the-top, extravagant
The one
parties.
clip of it I saw was a 16-year-old girl who's being given a BMW on her 16th birthday by her mother and throws a tantrum because she's been given it on the wrong day.
Or it's the wrong color.
Or it was supposed to be presented to her like the next day. And so she literally is screaming at her mother that she's ruined her day. But I think for those people, they're trophy wives, right? And then the children are status objects. And the husband, the mother becomes a slave to those children who are there to sort of reflect the husband's glory. So they are these servants to these horrible monsters. And I think children pick up on power dynamics in a heartbeat. So they're playing this power game with mom and dad and treating their mothers like servants and being, whatever.
I agree that power dynamics and the house, the dynamics within the relationship of the adults is very. It really is telling, and it really can. A specific kind of child could really run with that and really work it.
Kids are truth machines. They learn. They figure out where the fat is on you, and they punish you.
They want to know boundaries, right? They need to know boundaries. Psychologist from Psychology Today. Putting children and their needs first is dysfunctional and irrational. Adults are the breadwinners. They're creating and running the homes, gathering the food or the money to buy the food. They're far more important to the overall well-being of the family than the children are. To put children first is bound to cause stress. You're doing everything to make your children happy and fulfill their needs and encourage them, but you still feel guilty because you don't like playing with your children, and they sense that. And the great chapter in this
I love playing with my kids.
in this Jordan Peterson book, don't turn your children into something that you don't like.
Yeah,
right.
I think
it's children who, in his both neglecting the kids and letting them run riot and without discipline, because you can't discipline anybody, or overly protective, you're not creating a person that you would like to be a friend with, really. You're creating someone, in the case of helicopter parenting, they are saying that they're creating children who experience failure to launch their own lives because they don't even know who they are. They don't know what their real desires are because they've always been told, this is what I want.
This is what you should do, and this is how you should do it.
Right.
And,
There's the guilt thing, too. I mean, I see parents who really wish they could dedicate themselves to raising their own children. They feel incompetent to do it. They feel like a professional
wants them
to do it. Well, the other thing
First time around, of course.
But the other thing is, they don't talk to each other.
Seat of your pants?
Well, I was talking to a mother who actually did homeschool her kids.
You can read how to.
Yesterday. Well, the funny thing is young mothers are not consulting, and I'd say women and men generally, but specifically since we're talking about mothers, they're not consulting older women about, what is this? So there's a shame about it, too. I think they don't want to engage in that conversation, and they're wasting a resource.
I mean, for me, I can say that I know that part of my parenting accidentally came from my parents, whether I liked it or not. And part of it, I was actively trying to do a better job. And then part of it, I was, for lack of better way to put it, I was tripping out, and that I had an experience with my parents as a child that I didn't like. And I sort of decided I am never going to do that to my children, right? But sometimes you have to find the balance, and I found out the hard way that I didn't quite hit that balance with my kids on certain things. And I didn't really learn that until they became adults. And then I woke up to the fact that this was my issue. This was my trip. And because of it, I didn't teach my kids a real basic skill. I
understand this.
Yeah.
And it's, in a sense, it's your education.
Yeah.
We should helicopter ourselves.
I am my own helicopter.
Let me just say that this is KWMR, 90.5 Point Radio Station, 89.9 Bolinas, 92.3 in San Geronimo Valley, streaming live online at kwmr.org and cablecasting on Horizon Cable Channel 47. KWMR is supported by Art Rogers Photography in Point Reyes Station, helping the coastal community tell stories since 1973 through portraits of families, babies, groups, marriages, milestones, agriculture and landscapes, as well as through the Yesterday and Today series, which features family portraits captured over a span of time. More information at 415-663-8345 or at artrogers.com. And it's KWMR's programming is brought to you by our listener members, our monthly calendar club supporters, thank you, and by the Pacific Sun, Marin's Arts and News Weekly, online at pacificsun.com. And we're also supported by Whistle Stop, providing support and transportation services for older adults and people living with disabilities in Marin County. Whistle Stop's Active Aging Center provides meals, classes, multicultural gatherings, information, and referral services online at whistlestop.org. And this is Let's Talk, and there's Charles Schultz over there, Shelley Rugg over there,
Hello.
and there's Sally Phillips over there, and I'm Paul Raffel. And please,
yes,
give us
in.
a call, won't you? 415-663-8492, and tell us, well, let's see, tell us what are you a helicopter parent, or were you a helicopter parent? Were
Please
you
turn your
brought up by
helicopter off when you come on the air. My brother did send an email.
Yes.
Email was from my brother listening to the show in regard to Shelley Rugg's comments about trying to avoid being attacked when she returned home. His email was just read, "Yes, brothers attack!" ! That would be my brother who sent that in.
All right.
There you go. But you were saying,
Brother
Shelley.
Attackies United. I don't know.
You were saying.
Well, what I was wanting to bring up was coming back to how you brought the incels into this discussion. Is it because you think they are the outcome of a helicopter parent?
Well,
I mean, how does it relate?
It seems like they're, like I said, like they're not grown up, or they certainly weren't taught social skills, unless all incels are on the scale.
Well, that guy was apparently kind of severely, but I think of the guy in Santa Barbara, the young man in Santa Barbara that went and stabbed people or shot people. Remember a few years
Isla Vista.
And I mean, being in Isla Vista does get you a little desire to kill. That he didn't say his parents didn't really seem present, in his life very much. They're both like professionals. It seemed like there was a sort of absence of parenting. You're going to grow up with the internet and with
absence of basic communication, emotional. What does that call it?
Empathy. Well, I mean, people don't have empathy very much anymore.
Understanding your emotions. I mean, we experience emotions, and it's helpful to have other human beings help, teach us. Oh, emotional intelligence. That's what I was looking for. So that we understand this feeling we're having, why, and then we can start to, ask ourselves, well, why am I feeling like this? What do I need to do about it? What am I going to learn from it? So you can kind of have your own internal dialogue about your emotions without lashing out,
Right.
Because you don't know what's going on, and you think you have no choice but to lash out.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think I've read anywhere that the incel movement, the incel rebellion, is somehow caused by a helicopter parent. But it seemed to me that it was certainly maybe there's that's what they call
some
it.
kind of parenting.
Is that what they call masturbation now? Incel rebellion.
Incel rebellion. No,
boy.
it's just a misogynist cult. Basically, it's blaming women for not going to bed with these guys.
But I think we live in just an
when
utterly
they give
confused.
them the proper. They give them all the lines, the pickup
nice
lines,
right.
in the order they've been
actually
taught.
Taken those trainings on how to pick up women.
Oh, those are hideous. Yeah,
and then it doesn't work.
And they do all the tricks, and they still get turned down. So now they're really angry.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder, but we live in a culture that's sending confusing signals about sex and sexuality, and to people all the time, and it affects women, in a different way, because women don't have a problem, going to bed with people in the way that men do. Men have to be, persuasive or attractive, or in a way that women don't have to.
What?
Be.
What?
You can. Whoa, you don't think that's true?
You flipped the switch.
No, I'm just saying women deal with different problems vis-a-vis sex and
Okay,
men
maybe
do.
I'm misunderstanding, because what I heard you say is that men are particular about who they sleep with.
No.
Women will sleep with anyone.
No,
That's what I heard you say.
Can. It's about the possibility, not about a person's character. It's saying that if a woman goes to a bar on a Saturday night and wants to go home with a guy, she can. If a guy goes to a bar and wants to go home with someone, well, that depends on whether this woman is going to, select that person or not. But the woman doesn't have any problem
Women
with this.
are more, maybe selective.
They choose.
Selectors.
I'm not saying that women are by nature promiscuous. I'm just saying that women can have sex, whenever they want. They can go to the Western whenever and just, hey, you, and the guy is going to come with.
Maybe there's some incel women out there.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
I
doubt it.
Men won't pay attention to them, but men tend to be a little less picky, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think confident women should be, they're very picky.
I don't
That's
think
great.
women will respond with the kind of violence. Women that feel spurned or ignored, I think it's going to be more. There's not going to be the same kind of response.
my point.
And it's been escalated by the internet.
But we have woman children. They abound in Westmere. I know some of them. They're in their 80s.
Start.
But what I'm saying is that the culture is sending, or consumer culture is sending very confusing signals to both men and women, and they're different. But there is not the same kind of confusion because men and women are different. But so they're getting all this weird information, and so does that justify people being angry that they can't have sex when they want to have sex? No, it doesn't justify it. But I see a lot of people who are just sort of deeply confused by all the sort of images and things they're being told to do, or
well, and it also speaks to the disconnection that we are experiencing. What is someone calling?
I thought there was a flash.
Please.
Because of the internet, we think we're relating with people, but we've actually lost a lot of that direct connection.
As long as you don't care that it's fake, you can pretend it's real. And I think that's what's very sad of my generation and younger, is that if you are not willing to put to the test any of your ideas or your relationships in a serious way, then you can pretend you're friends with everybody. And in fact, that's what people like to do. I go around and I mean, cultivate enemies. That's what I'm saying.
It's encapsulating is what it is. And so you're not getting the kind of social interaction except maybe in the workplace. And I'm sure, Shelley, you have spoken to young people who say, well, no, I really can't meet anybody. It's very hard to meet someone in the real world, oddly.
We don't live very much in the real world.
Because people are more insular. Families are more insular. And, the whole nuclear family thing.
Really?
And I think so. I am making a vast
more than
generalization.
a long time ago when we had villages and we all helped each other out.
Yeah,
but there was
I think so.
a kind of way in which courtship, we're really on helicopter mothers now, our parents, but the way in which courtship happens through repeated contact in a social setting. So everybody goes to this event on a Friday night and you see that person, you get to know them over time. But now we've moved all that into kind of virtual spaces. We've reduced play for children into play dates. Their play has to be managed and scheduled.
They're not what's the word, just sort of happening ad hoc.
No, they're supervised at all times.
Part of that, too, is that the need for play dates comes out of the fact that kids aren't going to school in their own neighborhoods all the time. When I grew up, we'd walk to school and kids would join our walk as we went, past their house. They'd come and join us and we'd all walk to school together.
Right.
And get in fights with them. There were kids. I used to walk to school and there were kids in the neighborhood that would throw rocks at us because we were from a different block.
Sure.
It was good.
And we have a caller.
I grew up in the West Bank.
What's your name, please? You're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
Mia.
Meow.
Oh, meow.
Enjoying this conversation.
Thanks.
I don't have a little tight package of a message here, but just wanted to say the themes that I'm thinking of when you guys are talking about all this is, I think the issue is about that flip of accountability and empowerment. So I feel like helicopter parents and absentee parents both the result is the kid feels like, one, it's not their responsibility, and also one, they don't have control. So I feel like I'm not exactly saying it perfectly, but basically I think a good goal would be to have kids understand that, one, they have a big responsibility to take care of their own actions and care of their own happiness. but also they do have the power to do so. So, I mean, it's not entirely their fault or their responsibility, but I think like the more of an internal locus of control is good in terms of saying, like, I have a responsibility for my own actions and not blaming people all the time, but also saying I am empowered to do so. So I think, like, especially the incel, there's so much blaming of external forces and saying, hey, you know, it's all other people's fault.
Yes.
So, I don't know. I don't have a conclusion.
Right, that's
here,
a
but I
lack
feel
of
like-
emotional intelligence, actually,
Exactly.
you know?
So, I mean, I don't know. I just keep coming back to that sort of accountability and empowerment as like a little package, and that I think that's, I don't know, a goal to have. So,
Well said.
I don't
well
know
said.
exactly where to go from there, but that just keeps ringing in my ears when you guys are talking.
I think you're right, Mia. I think that a big piece of this is when young children are affected by what is going on in the intimate dynamics of the household and the parents. And depending on your temperament as a child or your age or your birth order or a myriad of details that we probably don't even understand, a person can grow up to be a senior citizen who is still blaming their parents
Well, that's
for their
tragic.
unhappiness.
Yeah.
And that's because maybe they did not, like you say, they did not take responsibility and become empowered to go get help themselves to take care to help
parents
themselves.
didn't.
Yeah,
No,
to be proactive about
the child
getting
who
the
grew up
resources.
needs to work that through and learn about how to let it go or how to understand it.
But how do you get the skills to do that if your parent is either not there or is
Well,
the
deciding
parent-
Or
everything
how do
for
you
you?
afford
As
the therapy?
clueless, yeah.
Well, but there's a formal word for this, Mia, which is called alienation. To bring Marx in, it's not Marx's birthday, but the alienation in the sense that your parents are radically disempowered. And, you know, people don't, especially professionals, don't say that. They say, I always wanted to be a lawyer for Chevron. It's like, oh, that's nice. And so they have to do this work, this horrible work to make the money. And sometimes the horrible work makes a lot of money and you live in a nice house. And so people forget that daddy and mommy are not really in control of their time or their lives. And they produce alienated children.
Yeah, but children have no clue
Right.
that the parents aren't in control. Children incarnate, I think, or have in this country with a sense that everything's sort of taken care of and everything's going to be okay because the adults have it together. And then that
There's a bubble
peeling
burst.
of the peeling of the onion or the bursting of the bubble. It's a series of layers of bubbles that
Yeah,
burst
yeah.
continuously, and you go,
I mean,
and
but
then you end
people-
up with Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, because people don't want to be empowered. I mean, that's Eric Fromm's, right, Escape from Freedom. People are terrified by freedom. This is why patriarchy persists, because people like it. People like daddy to make decisions. Now, we play these weird identity games, which daddy can be a black guy or daddy can be a blonde woman like Hillary, not like you, Mia, like Hillary Clinton, but they really do not want to take control of their lives and be more engaged in them. They want somebody someplace else to just manage their lives.
Yeah,
And-
it's like you need to have both the responsibility if you want that control. Like if you're going to take the control, you also need the responsibility.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
But
I'm
that
gonna
is-
sign off. Thanks, guys.
Okay,
Thanks, Mia.
thank you,
Oh,
Mira.
yeah.
Give us a call, 415-663-8492. And yeah, again, if the child is not taught responsibility or shown that it's possible to be responsible for their own actions or the way they interact with other children, how are they going to, we can't condemn them necessarily for not having the skill to do that.
When you're a kid and you're observing your parents, it seems to me like it could go in any number of ways, but let's say it can go one of two ways. You could continue that path that you see modeled out before you, or you could look at it and say, wow, this doesn't feel good. I don't know if I like that. Let's see if there's something else, if there's a different way. So, things can be passed from generation to generation because until somebody comes along and sees it differently and starts to wake up. And I think that in a way you can't sort of blame parents for not waking up their kids if they're not awakened themselves.
Sure,
Yeah, that's what I would call alienation, that they don't really have never had control. And now we're many generations into this where you can go back generation after generation and there isn't, a rebellion which needs to occur. I think it's really creepy. My generation is not rebelling. The boomers rebelled. And you had second wave feminism and you had civil rights and you had people saying, we don't like the way that this society is organized and we're going to change that. And I think it's now that entertainment and distractions, this laptop in front of me, the cell phones, it envelops you so completely. And it persuades you that nothing can change, that you have no power, but you can be entertained and you can be distracted.
But the irony is that it's that generation that did all that, the boomer generation. And
they quit in the 80s.
The one right after it, saying, whoa, I don't want my kids to have to go through that, or something. Or they want the world to be a better place. It didn't work what they did.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they did stop a war, maybe they did, you know, they protested. But, you know, they want their kids to have the perfect life, like as every mother and father does.
But that's sadness about their own failure, I think, is what that is.
Yeah.
And it's like that you didn't become a great sports star, so you obsess over your child's little league and you scream at the other parents.
But this is a certain socioeconomic sort of category you're talking about. There are many classes, if I have to use that word, cultures, people in different economic brackets, people who are living in decaying urban environments, or people living on farms, everything in between. And so I think some families where maybe life is a little tougher, they're more community-oriented, more maybe ideally a tighter, you know, there's a church that everyone is going to. The kids are raised with some structure that is community-oriented, like singing in church, or whatever the community rituals or activities are that bring people together, and then they have a sense of that village that Shelley was talking about. And there's the outcome is, I think, seems like it could be really different.
Well, you're talking about bonds that, you know, so we talk about the history of the sort of liberal ideal in Western culture and civilization. It says that you should be free, and you shouldn't be defined by who your parents are, or what class you grew up in, or what place you grew up in, or what sex you are, or what gender, what you shouldn't be. But actually, it's been very, very successful. But what's lost in all of that is what you're referring to, Sally, which is that those familial bonds, maybe they're religious, maybe they're your long-term association with a specific place rather than cultural bond. Whatever you want to call them. We really did a great job for a certain class of breaking down those bonds so that people could be more free. But then you deal with the consequence of really the success of this liberal ideal that we live in now. Two of them being that it requires the state in order to function, because the state has to stand in as parent, the government has to be, sort of everything that we broke down when we left the village.
It's also engendered that, the American myth of the do-it-yourself. You're on your own. You're self-satisfied. You're self-reliant. You're a cowboy. You're John Wayne. Yeah. And so
very lonely world.
Then you get people who are really flagrant, I think.
Well, I think it's because of sadness.
Like Clive and Bundy or whatever. Really, that's what happens.
You bring it back to West Marin, I see a lot of lonely people who would deeply like to have the kind of familial or cultural bonds that, again, to achieve this liberal ideal that we're not going to be trapped by our birth and we're going to have this freedom. There are great reasons to believe in that and want that to be. It does leave you potentially in a very isolated and lonely place.
Shelley and I are starting a cult.
Oh, great.
Oh, goody.
Can I lead the cult, please?
No,
if I had gotten here in the 60s, I totally would have had a cult.
It's
a
matriarchal cult.
We'll see about that. All right, little ladies have a cult.
Shelley has actually agreed. Oh, you just agreed. So we have a few more minutes. 415-663-8492. Put your 2 cents worth out there.
Put your 2 cents in. One of the things that brought this up in my head, this topic, was in 2018. This year, Utah became the first state to enact legislation which explicitly protected parents' right to free-range their children, to allow them to go to the park.
Grass-fed?
Organic and grass-fed, free range.
I think it's really great. Because it's relationship to risk.
There are laws in many states restricting children's autonomy, such as how old a child must be to walk to school alone.
But they can get married when they're 12 in some states.
Yeah, right.
Incel 12-year-olds who aren't getting married, and it's
In
causing
Delaware and Colorado, they will investigate reports of any child under the age of 12 being left alone. This is in the home, under the age of 12.
Where is
insane.
this?
Delaware and Colorado. Other states...
So what about those latchkey kids?
Yeah, exactly.
Criminalization. It's
Other
criminalizing
states,
being
North
poor.
Carolina have fire laws that stipulate a child under 8 should not be left home alone.
Wow.
Well, honestly, I wasn't allowed to be home alone when I was 8.
Well, this is
And
L.A.
No, I was in Connecticut.
Yeah.
No, I didn't move to L.A. till I was 11.
Uh,
And I did a
Illinois
great
requires
job of
children to be
sneaking
14
out.
years old to be left alone. To be
See,
left
that's
alone.
a little
But
extra.
I
see,
think
you can
that's-
babysit when you're 13.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
But this is inviting the state in to be the parent, and so. But
course.
this is
That's your
reinforced
point,
by the
yes.
craziness of the press. Because if a child is abducted or abused in Maine, we hear about it in California for 2 news cycles, as though we're living in this world of constant. They're just predators everywhere.
Well,
Looking
it
to
used
snatch
to
children.
be that you could leave your baby in the pram in the UK, in European countries or towns and cities, I guess. You'd leave the baby in the pram outside where
Outside
you
the
were
shop.
going into the shop, because how are you going to schlep a big pram in there? And someone did that in, like, Brooklyn, a visitor from, Norway or Denmark, whatever. And I think they arrested her.
Wow.
Yeah, sure.
Well, it's just, but also this thing where, in the neighborhood, everybody knew each other. You would know if a strange car was coming down the street. And so we're not present in our own communities, in our own lives. And so this anonymity is
And
caused-
no beat cops.
Picture this, okay? You pull
Is this
into a
radio?
gas
Picture this.
station. You've got a toddler and an infant in car seats.
Yep.
And you need to go in to pay.
Right.
So you're going to unstrap everybody, walk in there. Oh, can I have this? Can I have that? And then go back to the car, strap them in, and get your gas.
Get the gas.
And maybe they stay in their seats.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, you also are supposed to be somewhere real
Right.
soon.
You're late already.
You're stressed out. And so in those moments, you might get a little desperate and think, oh, come on, I can just run in, pay,
course
come
you can.
back out. But it's those helicopter unparents that are
Unparenting?
watching you.
Well,
And it's hard. I think it's really hard on parents today to know what's acceptable in our culture and what's not.
It's gotten to be a little paranoid.
Heavy-handed.
there's findings from child abductions actually have dropped. 105 children in the U.S. This is how many children are in the US?
320 million people. Let's say there are 100 million
Were
children.
victims of stereotypical kidnappings in 2011. This is the latest thing.
So the incidence is almost none. More kids got hit by lightning.
Exactly, and it's and stereotypical kidnappings are members of the family, like
right.
estranged husbands or whatever.
Right.
Uncle Steve.
People that are acquaintances. You don't really know them, but you've seen them around, and so it's people who are actually watching your kids most of the time. Every so often, there's somebody
Complete stranger, but not
complete
often.
stranger will just grab a kid and whatever. But they've gone down. Deaths have gone down to 8% from 40% in 1997.
People who were abducted.
Yeah, they used to kill them. 92% of child victims in 2011 ended in recovering the child alive, compared with 57% of victims in 1999. So it's actually getting safer, and yet we have more, I don't know. Your example of the gas station and leaving the kid in the car, of course you should leave the kid in the car.
Well, yeah, but
Unless somebody calls the police on you, and then Child
I
Protective
used to
Services.
get out of the car to go huff the fumes when I was little.
I remember that too. Great.
It smelled so good.
It does smell good. Little benzine for
smell of-
breakfast.
Smelling gasoline in the
Probably
morning.
accounts to my inability to conjure words.
Anybody wants to come huff gas with me and
brain
Sally,
cells.
we'll be at the Greenbridge gas station
Yeah.
after this. It is a thing to do. But we have to come up with where we want to strike this balance between the liberal ideal of freedom and not being defined by certain things and do we want to actually have communities? And I know some people use community as a brand, but do you want to have real living communities? And that means, for instance, like out here, homeschooling, look at all the retired professors. Look at all the men and women who have wisdom in all kinds of different fields. People tried to do this. Remember old Alden Bevington and his sequined flats and pink glasses. Alden, call in, please. People did try and do this to call upon those resources, and you could create a school out here. But I think even here we suffer a high degree of alienation. People feel they have to be at work, that they can't just let their kids roam, and they don't have the energy or maybe the money to put together another way of schooling children or another way to sort of keep all the kids in the neighborhood. So I appreciate how trapped, especially mothers, because you have this much stronger connection to this child in some way, or more immediate connection than the father does. How impotent I think mothers, especially young mothers, feel to try and push against all of these forces that are really breaking down that relationship between them and their children. So it takes
a lot of grit probably to be able to stand your ground and do it your own way.
Grit and then money. That always helps too.
Grit. Moneyed grit. Anyway, that was Let's Talk for this week. Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Paul.
Stepping into the breach, as they say.
Oh.
And
it's Audrey Hepburn's birthday, by the way.
and we want to thank all our listeners and callers. Thank you very much. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. We'll be back next week with another grand show. Meanwhile, here's a little music.